The hospital room was quiet except for the gentle hum of machines when I first opened my eyes. 8 months had passed while I was in a coma. 8 months during which my family had apparently decided I was never coming back. Miss Anderson, can you hear me? A nurse's face swam into focus, her expression a mix of shock and joy. Doctor, she's awake. My name is Rebecca Anderson, and at 32, I was waking up to discover that my life had been completely dismantled while I slept. The accident itself was a blur, rain-slicked roads, a truck crossing the median, then nothing. But what happened while I was unconscious would turn out to be far more devastating than the crash that nearly killed me. The first few days after waking were a haze of medical tests and physical therapy. My muscles had atrophied, my voice was weak from disuse, and the world felt slightly off-kilter. But my mind was sharp, taking in every detail as I slowly pieced together what I'd missed. It wasn't until my mother and sister finally visited, a week after I woke up, that I realized just how much had changed. "Rebecca, darling," my mother said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "We're so surprised to see you awake." Something in her tone made my skin crawl. My sister Amanda stood behind her, shifting uncomfortably and avoiding my eyes. "Where's Dad?" I asked, my voice still raspy. "He couldn't make it today," Amanda said quickly. "The house needed some repairs." "The house?" I frowned. "What's wrong with it?" Our family home, a beautiful Victorian that had been in our family for 3 generations, had always been meticulously maintained. Dad had spent every weekend tending to it, ensuring it stayed in perfect condition. My mother and Amanda exchanged glances that set off alarm bells in my head. "Well," my mother began carefully, "there have been some changes while you were away." "Away," I repeated. "I was in a coma, Mom, not on vacation." "Yes, well," she continued, smoothing her expensive blouse. "The doctor said you would likely never wake up. We had to make arrangements, move forward with our lives." The way she said it, cold, distant, like I had inconvenienced them by surviving, made my blood run cold. "What kind of arrangements?" Amanda stepped forward, suddenly finding her voice. "Mom and Dad signed the house over to Mark and me. For the kids, you know? They needed the space, and since you were—" She gestured vaguely at the hospital bed. I stared at them, trying to process what I was hearing. "You gave away my inheritance while I was in a coma." "Your inheritance?" My mother laughed dismissively. "Dear, you were brain dead. The doctors said there was no hope. What were we supposed to do? Let a perfectly good house sit empty while Amanda's family was crammed into that tiny apartment?" The casual cruelty of her words hit me like a physical blow. My own mother had written me off, handed my future to my sister, all while I lay fighting for my life. What they didn't know, what I wasn't ready to tell them yet, was that I remembered everything that happened while I was in the coma. Not in the traditional sense, but in brief, vivid flashes. Conversations held over my hospital bed, decisions made while they thought I couldn't hear. I remembered my mother's voice. "It's time to be practical. Rebecca wouldn't want us to put our lives on hold." I remembered Amanda. "Are you sure about this? What if she wakes up?" And most painfully, I remembered my father's quiet objection. "It doesn't feel right. She's still our daughter." But more importantly, they had forgotten one crucial detail in their rush to redistribute my supposed inheritance. My grandmother, before she passed away 5 years ago, had set up a trust fund, one that would prove to be either their salvation or their undoing, depending on the choices they made next. "You look tired, dear," my mother said, clearly uncomfortable with my silence. "We should let you rest." I managed a small smile, one that didn't reach my eyes. "Yes, I am tired. But before you go, have you been in touch with Mr. Harrison?" My mother's perfectly manicured hand froze on her purse. "Your grandmother's lawyer? Why would we need to contact him?" "No reason," I said softly. "Just curious about some paperwork he might have." The flash of uncertainty in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. They had no idea about the trust fund or the conditions my grandmother had set for the family home. After they left, I asked the nurse for my phone, miraculously preserved with my other belongings for 8 months. The battery was dead, but once it was charging, I made 2 important calls. The first was to Mr. Harrison. "Rebecca," he said warmly when his secretary put me through. "I just heard the wonderful news. How are you feeling?" "Like I've been hit by a truck," I said dryly. Which technically I was. Has anyone accessed the trust documents while I was out? No, he replied, his tone turning professional. Your grandmother's instructions were quite clear. The trust details were to remain sealed until either you turned 35 or other circumstances arose. Like my family giving away my inheritance while I was in a coma. There was a long pause. They did what? Apparently, my medical condition made them feel entitled to some estate planning. I filled him in on my conversation with my mother and sister. That's problematic, he said carefully. Your grandmother specifically included provisions about attempted property transfers without full family consent. Would you like me to begin proceedings? Not yet, I said, an idea forming. First, I need to see how far they're willing to go. My second call was to Kate Chen, my best friend and investigative journalist. She answered on the first ring. Bex, oh my God, is it really you? When did you wake up? About a week ago, I said, feeling tears prick at my eyes. After my mother's cold reception, Kate's genuine joy was overwhelming. Listen, I need your help. My family's been up to something while I was out, and I need to know exactly what. Kate's response was immediate and fierce. Tell me everything. I'll start digging today. Over the next few days, as I worked with physical therapists to regain my strength, information started flowing in. Kate's investigation revealed a trail of financial and legal maneuvers that made my stomach turn. Not only had my parents signed over the house to Amanda and her husband Mark, but they'd also liquidated several family investments that should have been held in trust. The money had been redistributed among various accounts, with a significant portion going into home renovations and a new car for my sister. They really thought you were never coming back, Kate said during one of her visits, spreading documents across my hospital tray. Look at these dates. They started making moves barely 2 months after your accident. I picked up a property transfer document noting my mother's elegant signature. They didn't even wait for my prognosis to stabilize. There's more, Kate continued, pulling out her laptop. I found emails between your mother and several estate attorneys. She was looking for ways to have you legally declared incompetent to gain control of any assets in your name. Did she succeed? No. Apparently, your grandmother's lawyer blocked the attempt, though I'm not sure how. I smiled, thinking of the trust documents safely held in Mr. Harrison's office. I do. Just then, my door opened and Amanda walked in alone. She stopped short when she saw the papers spread across my tray. What's all this? She asked, her voice tight. Just catching up on what I missed, I replied calmly. 8 months is a long time. Kate gathered her things, squeezing my hand before leaving. Call me later, she whispered. Amanda stood awkwardly by the door, clutching her designer purse. New, I noticed, probably purchased with my family's money. The house looks amazing, she said finally. Mark and I have done so much work on it. The kids love having a real yard to play in. I'm sure they do. I kept my voice neutral. How are Mom and Dad settling into their new place? She shifted uncomfortably. They're adjusting. The condo is smaller, of course, but Mom says it's easier to maintain. They'd moved into a condo. My parents had given away our family home and moved into a condo, all while I lay in a hospital bed. The betrayal cut deep, but I forced myself to remain calm. And Dad? Is he really okay with all this? A flash of guilt crossed Amanda's face. He misses the garden. But it's better this way, Bex. You have to understand, we never thought that I'd wake up. I finished for her. That I'd want to know what happened to my inheritance, to my home. It's not like that, she protested weakly. We were thinking of the family's future. The kids needed my inheritance, I said flatly, while their aunt was brain dead and couldn't object. Tears filled her eyes. Please, Bex, don't make this harder than it has to be. What's done is done. The papers are signed, the transfers are complete. Even if you wanted to fight it, you've been in a coma. You have no resources, no money. I let her words hang in the air for a moment before responding. Are you sure about that? Amanda's face paled slightly. What do you mean? I picked up one of the property transfer documents, examining it carefully. Did Mom ever mention Grandma's trust fund? The one she set up specifically for the house. What trust fund? Amanda's voice had risen an octave. There wasn't any trust fund. We went through all the paperwork. Not all of it, I said quietly. Grandma was very specific about when certain documents could be accessed and who needed to consent to any property transfers. The implications started to sink in. Amanda sank into the visitor's chair, her designer purse sliding to the floor forgotten. "You're lying," she whispered, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. "You're just trying to scare us." I reached for my phone, pulling up Mr. Harrison's contact information. Should we call him together? I'm sure he'd be happy to explain the legal ramifications of transferring trust property without proper authorization. "Don't," she said quickly. "Just tell me what you want." "What I want?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I want my family back. The one that wouldn't have written me off and divided up my inheritance while I was fighting for my life. But since that's not possible, I'll settle for justice." The next few days were a whirlwind of legal meetings conducted from my hospital room as I continued my physical therapy. Mr. Harrison brought the trust documents, which revealed exactly what my grandmother had suspected might happen after her death. "Your grandmother was a shrewd woman," he explained, laying out the papers. "She saw how your mother handled money, how she favored Amanda. This trust was her way of ensuring the family home would be protected. The terms were clear. The Victorian house was held in trust, with strict conditions about its use and transfer. Any changes required unanimous consent from all living family members, including me, comatose or not. The property transfer your parents executed is void," Mr. Harrison confirmed, "as are any renovations or modifications made without proper authorization." I thought about Amanda's renovations, the money they'd spent believing they owned the house free and clear. "What about the other assets they liquidated?" "Those will need to be repaid," he said firmly, "with interest." When my mother finally came to visit again, her usual polished facade was cracking. "Darling," she began, her voice honey-sweet, "there seems to be some confusion about the house." "No confusion, Mom," I interrupted. "Just fraud. Would you like to see the trust documents, or should we wait for the court hearing?" Her face hardened. "You ungrateful girl. After everything we've done for you." "Everything you've done for me?" I sat up straighter in my hospital bed. "You mean like trying to have me declared incompetent, or dividing up my inheritance while I was in a coma?" "We thought you were gone," she snapped, her composure finally breaking. "The doctors said there was no hope. What were we supposed to do?" "You were supposed to be my mother," I said quietly. "You were supposed to believe in me, fight for me, wait for me. Instead, you couldn't wait to write me off and hand everything to Amanda." Tears filled my eyes, but I blinked them back. "Did you even grieve, Mom? Or were you too busy redecorating my childhood home?" She had no answer for that. The legal proceedings moved quickly. The property transfer was invalidated, and Amanda's family was given 30 days to vacate the house. The liquidated assets had to be repaid, with significant penalties. "They'll never be able to afford it," Kate said one evening as she helped me pack up my hospital room. I was finally being discharged. Your sister's family was living way beyond their means, counting on that house. "I know," I said, folding the last of my clothes. "That's why I'm offering them a deal." The meeting was set for the following week at Mr. Harrison's office. My entire family was there. Amanda and Mark looking worried, my mother cold and distant, my father just looked tired. "Here's what's going to happen," I began, my voice steady. "The house will be sold. The proceeds will repay the liquidated assets and cover the trust fund penalties. Whatever's left will be divided equally, 1/4 each to me, Amanda, and our parents." "But where will we live?" Amanda asked, her voice small. "I'm not finished," I continued. "I've spoken with Mr. Harrison about creating a new trust, one that will provide housing assistance for family members who need it, including help with a down payment for a new home for your family." The room was silent as my words sank in. "Why would you do this?" my mother finally asked. "After everything." "Because I'm not you," I said simply. "I won't destroy my family for money. But make no mistake, this is your only chance. If you fight this, if you try to contest anything, the deal is off and we go to court." My father spoke for the first time. "It's more than we deserve." "Yes," I agreed. "It is." The aftermath was complicated. Amanda's family found a smaller house in a nice neighborhood, more suited to their actual means. My parents stayed in their condo. Our relationship strained but slowly mending, at least with my father. The Victorian sold quickly, its value increased by Amanda's renovations. The proceeds covered everything. with enough left over to give everyone a fresh start. 1 year after waking from my coma, I stood in my new apartment, surrounded by boxes and possibilities. The trust fund my grandmother had set up, the one specifically for me, separate from the house trust, had ensured I would always be secure. Kate helped me unpack, hanging photos and arranging furniture. "Do you regret it?" she asked, giving them another chance. I looked at a family photo taken years ago, before money and greed had torn us apart. "No," I said finally, "but I'll never forget what they were willing to do." My phone buzzed. A text from Amanda. "The kids ask about you. When you're ready, we'd love to have you over for dinner." I stared at the message for a long moment. The betrayal still hurt, the trust still broken. But maybe, just maybe, there was hope for something new. "Tell them I'll think about it," I texted back. That evening, I sat on my balcony watching the sunset. My body had healed, stronger now than before the accident. My mind was clear, no longer clouded by family obligations and expectations. Mr. Harrison had called earlier with news. The Family Assistance Trust was officially established, its terms clear and fair. No one could take advantage of it the way they had tried to take advantage of me. My grandmother's voice echoed in my memory. "Money shows you who people really are, Rebecca. Remember that." She had been right. Money had shown me exactly who my family was, but it had also shown me who I was. Someone stronger than they expected, wiser than they gave me credit for, and ultimately more forgiving than they deserved. My phone buzzed again. My father this time. "Proud of you, sweetheart. Your grandmother would be too." I smiled, thinking of the woman who had seen all this coming, who had protected me even after she was gone. She had given me more than money or property. She had given me the power to choose what kind of person I wanted to be. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to rebuild or retreat. But for now, in this moment, I was exactly where I needed to be. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't in winning everything. It's in choosing what to keep and what to let go. I had kept my dignity, my independence, and the power to define my own future. The rest, well, the rest was just property. And as I sat there, watching the city lights come alive, I realized that my coma hadn't just been about surviving physically. It had been about waking up in every sense, to who people really were, to what truly mattered, and most importantly, to my own strength. I was awake now, truly awake, and that was worth more than any inheritance.